Hi, I'm Mark Gaylor, Sony Alpha Ambassador, and in this series of short video tutorials we're going to deep dive into Sony's new menus that we see on cameras such as the A7 IV and the Alpha 1. So without much further ado, let's get started. For me, the most valuable menu items on the Sony Alpha cameras are the memory settings. Now we can recall registered memories, that's basically groups of camera settings on the shoot mode dial. We simply dial that between 1, 2 and 3, and then we can recall the optimum settings for maybe shooting portraits, action or landscapes, and we can quickly change those groups of settings so we don't have to keep deep diving into the menus each time we change what we're photographing. So we need to go into the menus because we can only recall the settings from that shoot mode dial. So if we're basically registering a memory, we need to come into the menus. This is on the shooting menu, page 4, and then come over to the menu items. Now that first one line item may be grayed out because that only becomes an active menu item if you've turned the shoot mode dial to 1, 2 or 3. And this top line item is usually for recalling settings on a memory card, because not only can we register settings or groups of settings to the camera's memory, we can also save them to a memory card as well. If we are recalling a registered memory from a memory card, we can also choose which card slot to use. So the default is slot 1, but we can change that to slot 2 if we don't want to remove the card from the primary card slot there. So if you are registering a memory, however, to the camera, you're going to use this second line item, camera set memory. Now, before you register it by pressing the center button in the control wheel, you can see all of the menu settings. So it's worth taking a quick look just to make sure you haven't forgotten anything. Now, this is just one of 16 pages of camera settings that will be registered to the memory. If you cycle down by pressing the down button on that control wheel, you'll go down and see the other settings being saved. So when I get to page 8, for instance, you can see it's also saving my ISO auto minimum shutter speed settings, which for the portrait memory is going to be registered as 1/250th of a second, because I want to be able to photograph people who may be moving slowly. So let's backtrack because we've got ahead of ourselves here. If we are going to set the camera up to register memory, we'll need to shoot the preferred exposure mode on the shoot mode dial. Now, for most of my genres, I choose A for aperture priority, but you could choose shutter priority or program if you prefer. Now, in my ebooks, my 500-page ebooks that you can download from patreon.com, I will list all of the settings that I will be registering to the memory. Now, I've listed 2 there in that dark orange color because even though it's 16 pages of settings memorized to the registered memory, there are still a couple that may not be registered, such as the display quality and finder frame rate. Once you've set up the entire camera in the exposure mode on the top of the shoot mode dial, you'll then come into the camera set memory and choose a location from that top row. You can save it to 1, 2 or 3. The M1 to M4 settings will be saved to the card, the memory card. Now those memories that are saved to the memory card will be safe and sound there until you format the card, and then they will be deleted. So if you want to back these up, you would probably back them up to a computer or use one of your older cards that you can just put in your camera bag for the sole purpose of loading and saving memories to. Once you press that center button in the control wheel, that will be registered, and then we recall that setting from the shoot mode dial on the top of the camera. So for instance, now that I'm ready and I've programmed or registered all 3 of the memories for 1, 2 and 3, this is something I call my PAL workflow: portraits on 1, action on 2 and handheld landscapes on 3. And this ensures that I hardly ever miss a shot, because those give me sound start starting point settings. I will go in and fine tune one or two of the camera settings depending on what I'm shooting, but when I've modified that group of settings, if I turn the shoot mode dial away from one and then back to one, the default registered settings come back into play. Now there are a couple of things, as well as turning the shoot mode dial to 1, 2 or 3, that I might need to just double check to make sure I've got the appropriate settings for what I'm shooting. Now the memories that I've registered will hold the given aperture, but that can only be recalled if the aperture ring on a G Master lens is turned to the A. If that is turned to a set aperture on that aperture ring, then the memory can't override that. So by default I usually leave my G Master lenses with the A setting. The other thing that I mentioned earlier is that finder frame rate is currently not being saved to those memories. So if I go in and start shooting sports on number 2, I will go into my FN menu and just raise the finder frame rate so it's got that faster refresh rate. Okay, the other things that the memory can't override is maybe a steady shot mode on the side of the lens. This is typically found with those white G and G Master lenses. Mode 1 for keeping the camera very still, 2 for panning, and again the memory can't override that, so I just need to double check I've got the correct steady shot mode on that lens. And the other thing that I might change for portrait mode, if I switch from taking portraits of people to portraits of animals, I'll go into my FN menu and change the subject detection from human to animal. Okay, so if you're wanting to modify a registered memory, you just want to change one or two of the settings, I've got a separate video tutorial that just looks at how we can then go in and modify or re-register a setting. That might also be useful if you're using my PAL camset settings and you want to modify one of my settings that I've shared via my patreon.com website. Okay, so there are 3 additional memories we can program the camera for, and these can be accessed from the registered custom shoot settings on the same page. That's the shooting menu, page 4. Now if we come into that line item, we are given a choice of recall, custom hold 1, 2 and 3. These are not accessed by the shoot mode dial, these are accessed by holding down a custom key, and these group of settings will only be active while we depress that custom key. So there only are a number of custom buttons on the camera that we can hold whilst also pressing the shutter release. So my favorite two to use in this instance are the AEL key, that's in the top right, and the AF on button. Once we go into this line item for one of these 3 recall custom hold settings, you'll be given the options for 11 settings that you can program or register. Now if you don't want to use one of these line items, just uncheck the box. So for instance, exposure compensation, I don't want to override my existing exposure compensation when I start holding down that custom key. So there will probably be only half a dozen that I actually want to save. Once I've gone through those line items and I've set that up, I'm going to register that. Now the other option of course is just to set the camera up and then import the current settings. So again you'd probably be in aperture, priority, program or shutter, exposure mode, and then set all of the settings that you want the recall custom hold to remember, and then import those current settings. Not all of the settings will be saved, unlike the shoot mode dial which can save 16 pages of settings, but you will save most of the important settings there. One of the interesting things that I've only just discovered actually is the when we've got those 11 line items and we're registering it, you would never see ISO auto minimum shutter speed. So this would always lead me to saving a shutter priority with a specified shutter speed. But I've only just found out that although ISO auto minimum shutter speed is not listed, it is actually saving that ISO auto minimum shutter speed if I want want to shoot in aperture priority with a given aperture and a given minimum shutter speed. So that would be a way of importing the current settings if you want to access those settings. Okay, so the recall custom hold obviously have to be assigned to custom keys. So the very next step will be to come into the yellow setup menu, page 3, choose Operation Customize, and then choose Custom Key Dial Settings. And here I'm choosing the custom key dial settings for stills. Now we'll come in and target that AEL hold button. Now the current setting by default is for automatic exposure lock, but I don't use that setting. So now I'm going to come in and browse looking for one of those 3 recall custom hold settings, and you'll find it on page 3 of 33 on the A7lV IV camera. And then of course just a confirmation that I've now assigned recall custom hold 2 to 1. I've assigned recall custom hold number 3 to the AF on button, and the recall custom hold 1 I've actually assigned to the focus hold button on my Sony lenses. So that's a great useful custom button because you can get easy access to that button even though it's not on the camera. Now just a reminder that all of those shoot mode memories and the 3 recall custom hold settings, together with all of the custom key settings, the FN menu settings, I've saved them all to a single file called the CamSet file onto a memory card, and I'm sharing those settings for a range of cameras such as the A7R4, the A9 II, the A1 and the A7 IV camera. So you can set up your camera exactly the way that I've set mine up by accessing that CamSet file, and of course you'll see how I've set that up on the supporting 500-page ebook that supports your specific camera. I also have another companion video tutorial that supports this workflow of using 3 memories on the shoot mode dial and 3 recall custom hold memories, and this is outlined in the Memory Mastermind video, and this shows you how I very rarely, if ever, miss a shot. If you found this information useful, head over to patreon.com/Mark Gaylor. I'm offering an Alpha Creative Skills support channel where you can download a 500-page camera-specific ebook, and I've covered most of the late model Alpha cameras. You'll also be able to download a CamSet file if you own one of the later model Alphas. You'll be able to set up your entire camera with just a single file copied to a memory card. I also offer additional ebooks for people to download to help them master the skills of creative photography, and also a range of 1-hour seminars that look at the using the camera gear to the best effect and also to build up your skills of photography in general. So head over to patreon.com/Mark Gaylor.